is completely unique to themselves and their household. So, a lot of people are indexed. People are indexed to different things. Like some people, the most of their expenditures go on rent and student loans. Other people, it's healthcare. Other people, it's their mortgage. So it just completely depends. It depends on your real estate market. It depends on where your lifestyle is. So I don't feel that a single number can capture, the turbulence of the economy in terms of, the purchasing power of your dollars. So really, the only honest way to, interpret inflation is to construct your own index and looking at your own real estate prices and your cost of healthcare and your cost of education. And it totally depends on your circumstances. I know that's not, an easy thing to do, but certainly CPI is just not representative for most people. And if you look at what has gone up enormously, it's healthcare, it's education, it's rent. Those are incorporated into CPI, but probably with weightings that aren't representative for most normal people. So yeah, I think the idea that you can compress this economy-wide output into a single figure is just preposterous. And you also have these like games that the press will play, like where 1 month they'll pick core CPI, they'll exclude food and energy for some reason, they'll pick alternative indices, and there's like a half a dozen different inflation indices that they use, and they'll selectively pick the one that's like the least, that's increased the least in the last period. And of course, if you have like a dozen or half dozen indices, you can always pick the most favorable one. But at the end of the day, like we're looking at roughly 7 to 10% year over year declines in the purchasing power of the dollar. That's where we stand. That's enormously high. That's the highest in effectively living memory for most people, and that's incredibly destabilizing. And that wasn't forecasted. None of our economists anticipated that. A lot of Bitcoiners anticipated it, but your establishment economists failed to predict that. And there should be a reckoning right now. But instead, we have a number of deflections and denials and attempts to misrepresent what's happening. And I think people are seeing through it. I think people are fed up and they're seeing through it. But we're seeing a number of excuses which don't make any sense. It's basically nonsensical excuses coming from the White House, from the highest organs in our government, and it's just kind of obscene because the relationship is pretty straightforward, and they're trying to misrepresent what's happening here.
Let me ask you this: let's say we could snap our finger and COVID would literally just disappear. Do you think we would still have the supply chain impacts that are happening right now, even if COVID was not a thing?
Yeah, I think COVID was a very useful kind of culprit or pretext. But the truth is, if you look at the numbers, like the supply chain is stressed because there's a record demand shock. The supply chains are functioning at capacity. People, they take the pictures of the ships and they say, oh, look, we're bottlenecked. We have these bottlenecks. Our supply chain's not working properly. If you look at the numbers, the ports are moving record amounts of volume in cargo. So, what's happening here is, okay, maybe there's some COVID-related restrictions, but what's really happening is there was an enormous demand shock based on these fiscal measures, which printed the equivalent of 25% of GDP in some quarters in 2020. I mean, you're looking at enormous outlays.